Bellarmine, and we're so glad that you're joining us again for one of our alumni conversation. This has been a series of talks that we've had with alumni. We have a great program this evening with two of our very distinguished alumni. So just a couple of the little bit of the ground rules. We are recording this, and there's been a great number of folks who've couldn't make it for the evening, and I've looked up these recorded chats and conversations subsequent to them being held. So that's a good thing for us. We will have ample time for questions and answers. We've disabled your chat box in terms of showing it to everybody, but certainly those of us that are hosts, myself, Paige Banks on our development team, and Brian and Brianne will be able to see your posts. So if you have questions along the way, but certainly at the end, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in there. We'll curate those, and we'll ask those of our participants and of our presenters for the evening. So we look forward to a great evening and learning more about financial planning and those fun topics, is the way Brianne put it, death, taxes, and money. So as we do with all things at Bellarmine, we start with prayer, and we're very honored this evening to have a member of our development team and a former faculty member here at Bellarmine, Father Fred Mayoski, to lead us in our opening prayer. Father Fred.
Okay, this prayer is taken, it's part of a prayer of Teilhard de Chardin. I use it this morning, and I'm using part of it again this evening. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord God, when I feel that you are holding me together and I am absolutely passive within your hands, the hands of the great unknown force that has formed me, I pray, guide me totally by your will to do even more energetically your work. I pray that I might recognize you, my God, under the species of each force that seems to be guiding or controlling me to do your work. So Lord, we pray, be with us, guide us, help us as we think, help us as we interact, and help us to become the people you are calling us to become. And we ask this through Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Okay.
Thank you, Father. So it's my pleasure to introduce both of our presenters. Since they live together and hang out a lot, they're going to do this as co-presenters, as you could tell as they're sitting there. So I'd first like to do a little introduction of Brianne. Brianne's the attorney at Campbell Legal Planning. Her specialty practice areas are estate planning, business law, and probate and trust administration. You know, in the website, it talks about how much she enjoys working with clients to create lasting estate plans and advising executors and trustees, in the administration of all types and sizes of estates, and also working with business owners. Brianne got her law degree at Seattle University School of Law, her English literature bachelor's degree from the University of Portland. Couldn't get away from the Jesuits at all, apparently. She's a member of the Tacoma Bar Association, Washington State Bar Association. Served on a number of boards and continued to serve on a number of boards, including 6 years on the Bellarmine Board of Trustees. 2013, she was named one of the 40 under 40 honorees by the Puget Sound Business Examiner. She grew up in Gig Harbor and is, as we know, a proud graduate of Bellarmine alum. She lives in Gig Harbor with her husband, Brian, and her 2 kids, Kate and Max, and loves running, reading, cooking, playing with her kids, and got a side gig going on with the candle business, but I don't want to promote that too much tonight. I'll let her do that. And then Brian is the president and managing partner of FLS Financial Group. Raised in Tacoma, Brian also attended Bellarmine Preparatory School, got a BA in Business Administration from UW, Michael G. Foster School of Business. Started as a financial advisor in 2000, came back to Tacoma, earned the Certified Financial Planner designation and Chartered Financial Consultant. Brian began partnering with a local accounting firm and formed FLS Financial Group. Together, these firms provide individuals and families with a coordinated, collaborative approach to managing their finances and their wealth. Brian has served as one of the founding board members of the revised Bellarmine Preparatory Alumni Association. He's a member of the Financial Planning Association. He's got a lot of letters after his name. He's a CFP, a C small h FC with an R after it. Series 6, 7, 63, and 65. Not that means anything to anybody except those that are in that business, but it sounds darn impressive. Surprisingly, Brian and his wife Brianne, he also has two wonderful kids, and they live in Gig Harbor along with their dog Daisy, who never made it to the bio in Brianne's thing apparently. So Daisy was spurned in that case. In his free time, Brian enjoys working on projects around the house and rooting for his beloved husky dog. So it's now my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Brian and Brianne.
Thanks, Dean. Hi, I'm Brian. Nice to meet everyone and see some familiar faces here today. When Dean asked us to do this, I saw the list of speakers before, and my comment was, "You really want us to speak?"
You guys are in for a treat compared to some of those like Father John or the people who work in the movies, and then there's us.
So I'm hopefully not going to disappoint you today, but I do think what we do is important, and I would like to be able to share anything that I think would be helpful on the legal side or the financial planning side. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we got into these careers, what we do as attorneys and financial planners. And then we really want to have questions. That's always a lot more fun to hear from what you guys are interested in learning about. Full disclaimer, we cannot give you financial or legal advice through a Zoom meeting today. We don't know your situation. So full disclosure, we can give you general thoughts. And if you have any specific questions after, we'll be able to make sure we provide our information. We can talk with you at a later time. So can't get into the weeds too much, but we hope to give you a kind of an overview of what we do for a living, why we think it's important, and hopefully maybe give you some general advice that you could apply to your situation. So,
well, and as we were talking about before too, there are so many different things that we could talk about tonight. And so one of the things that's important for us to talk about is Bellarmine. So that's going to be part of it, our connection to Bellarmine. But as we go through, Brian kind of said this already, but just to reiterate it in case you missed it, as we're going through, if there's something you want to know more about, or you want us to go deeper into something, just as Dean said, type it into the chat box or the question box. And then at the end, we'll save a good amount of time to answer questions or go into other things that you guys want to hear about.
Great. Yeah, so kind of just starting off. So just a quick bio on what I do, and Brianne will get into what she does in her practice. I'm a certified financial planner, like Dean said. So my profession is to help people make smart financial decisions. And a lot of what I do is educating people on the various options. And that's one thing I really enjoy about what I do. And what I think I learned from Bellarmine is educating people. Because in my industry, there's really no right or wrong way to do things. There's a lot of pros and cons. And once you learn about those various options, you can make an informed decision. So there's a lot of educating that what I do on the various topics. So financial planning is pretty broad. Financial planning covers retirement planning, investment planning, risk management or insurance planning, college planning, tax planning, estate planning, which obviously gets into the legal side that Brianne does.
When I work with him, it's vacation planning. How can we save for vacation?
Yep, vacation planning. So there's a lot of different areas that we touch on, and there's a lot of overlap from what I do and what Brianne does. So we do share a lot of clients together that either need financial planning or legal advice. So a lot of shared clients in that regard. So what I do on a regular basis, I'm based in Tacoma. My practice is in Tacoma. My clients are mostly based in the greater Northwest area, but as people move and relocate, I have relationships around the country as well. And so what I do on a regular basis is understand what kind of financial goals that my clients are interested in achieving, creating a plan, and helping implement that plan, whatever that may be. And in my industry, the biggest barrier to planning is procrastination and lack of education. What I've learned in my career is finances are not taught in school. I don't know if any of you had a basic financial class, and I don't know if Bellarmine's added that to the curriculum since I graduated, but a lot of things we learn on the financial side are things that we learn from our parents, our friends, online research, and we really don't have any type of formal. So a lot of times people come to me and say, just basic understanding of budgeting and planning for the future. Those are things that, a lot of clients aren't really familiar with those concepts. So in a nutshell, and what we do know in financial planning on my side is things change. We could have a great plan today, but inevitably life happens. So it's time to review that from time to time and adjust as needed. Because, we could have the best laid plan, but, life throws us curveballs from time to time. So we need to update appropriately. So in a nutshell, that's what I do on a regular basis. And then I'll turn it over to Brianne to talk more about her industry and what she does.
Well, I was just going to tell you guys a little bit about me. So like Dean said, I'm an estate planning attorney. I just figured out that I have been doing this for 18 years, which seems shocking to me because it seems like I just started, but I guess it's been a while. And I kind of look at myself as the estate planner for everyone because my real mission is just to help people have their estate planning done. It's like a real soapbox for me. But when you consider that somewhere between 75 and 85% of the population does not have will, and that's just the most basic thing you could have, that just shocks me so much because we spend our whole lives basically planning everything out. You're thinking about this, you're making decisions about that, and then to just leave kind of everything open at the end, including kids, where kids are going to go, how money is going to come to them, just all kinds of different things. To me, that's really shocking that people don't want to address it, but I think we'll get into it in a little bit. There's a lot of psychology behind why people do not want to get into it, and I can understand that too. So I always think no estate is too small for me. I love working with, I call them regular people, but I like working with just people just like us who, middle income, need a basic plan or need not something crazy. They don't have a lot of tax issues, although I help people with those too. But for me, it's really also about communicating practicality to people, because I think a lot of times when attorneys talk, they're not considering the audience that they're speaking to. And we have a lot of education about a certain thing. And we forget that everyone else doesn't have all that education or have the same level of knowledge that we do. So I always look at what I do as kind of like what Brian was talking about, educating people, is really just kind of figuring out where people are at with what they understand and what they need, and then translating that for them into things that make sense. And my tagline for my business is planning for what matters most. And that's always finding what matters most to you and making sure that whatever plan we put in place is covering what matters most to you and making sure that that happens. So I thought I would just give you just a tiny little bit of background about me too. So obviously I went to Bellarmine. Brian and I were in the same class at Bellarmine. And I went to University of Portland for my undergraduate. I got a degree in English because I knew that I would be going to law school and I wanted to study what I loved in college, which was English. Why did I go to law school? Sometimes okay. But then I went to Seattle U for law school and really have just really gelled with what I do. So in law school, you kind of see all these different ideas of things that you might do, criminal law, personal injury, just all kinds of different things. And I always knew, because my uncle was an estate planning attorney that I had worked with in the past, I kind of had an inkling that that was interesting to me. My dad is in the fundraising and development sphere of the world, and he'd always said, oh, you need to do estate planning and plan giving. And when I was younger, I was like, no, that's not interesting. I don't want to talk to people about death and taxes and money all the time. Like, no, thank you. But really it was when Brian's the financial planner, and he was doing that job while I was in law school, and everything just kind of started to click for me. Like, oh, this is a way not to talk about just death and taxes, but to really take care of people. And this is a type of law that isn't so theoretical. It's actually practical, and it will impact every person that I work with, and it impacts them in a really personal way, and it impacts their families. And I always think when I'm working with clients too, I love working with my clients, but I'm always thinking about the real gift, the real help is to their family. So if something happens to them, their family might have an easier time when they have to deal with everything. And that is my ultimate goal. Like, we're going to create a plan. We're going to put the best foundation that we possibly can in place. Like Brian said, things constantly change. So I look at our documents as sort of a living, breathing thing, in that it's only going to work as much as you care to note if there's a change, and that we can update it for you. But the roadmap will be there. I try to plan for a lot of different possibilities. And it's funny because I think that's a comment I get from clients a lot, that I still kind of don't expect it, but I'll say like, okay, if this happens, who do you want for this? And they'll answer. And then I'm like, well, if that person can't do it, then who? And if that person can't do it, then who? And people are always like, oh, we never thought about that if that person couldn't do it, and it's just like, we're trained to think through all those different kind of possibilities. But anyway, this is one of my passions for sure. I have others. My children are top of the list. We have two amazing kids. I don't know how we ended up with them. We've got a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. One is 2.5 years away from Bellarmine, which is also shocking to think about. But we are really excited for them to start their own experience there and have their own experience. And one of my favorite experiences from my career so far was the 6 years that I spent on the board of directors for Bellarmine. That was just really, really rewarding. And I am always struck when I go to Bellarmine for a meeting or really for anything. There's really a strong sense of coming home, which I think is kind of funny because in high school I was really awkward and nerdy. And, high school is kind of an awkward time in life when you're trying to adjust to things. But now when I'm up there, it just feels like, there's a sense of peace and just a sense of belonging. And I think that really is a testament to not just the school, but the community and the faith foundation that's at the core of everything that Bellarmine does. I think that really sticks with me. And I would say that's something that has really I can just feel it with me everywhere I go. So in this job, in the community, I often note too when people call me to set up appointments like, I saw that you went to Bellarmine and I decided that I would hire you. Okay, yeah, I understand that because we just have a common connection.
Yeah, it's definitely a tight-knit community. And just to give a little more plug to Bellarmine, because I want to, appreciate why we're here today because of Bellarmine. We support Bellarmine. We love the community, and we want to continue to support Bellarmine. But one of the things that I probably caused me to go into this career was the work study opportunity that Bellarmine presented, because I grew up in a household where my parents sacrificed to give education for me and my two younger brothers, Catholic school all the way from first grade all the way through high school. And that was a struggle. And without the financial aid ability through financial Bellarmine provides, I probably wouldn't have been able to go to Bellarmine. And actually, I think I do what I do today because it gave me that opportunity, so I could help educate my clients to help plan for costs and schooling and things like that, which my parents never had a planner. They never had people giving them advice on what to do. They're all winging it like most of us. And fortunately, they made it work, but it was a struggle financially. So one of the things that really, I think, shaped me trying to be introspective of why I do what I do was money was always a source of stress, not knowing if my parents could afford this. And that was always a kind of a negative feeling. And I didn't want to have the same type of feeling myself. So giving back to my clients and helping them hopefully plan better than our experience was something that really shaped me, kind of looking back on how I probably got into this career and what I like about it. With that being said, I know hopefully we have some questions today because we really
We're
want
not done yet, are we?
No.
Remember our roadmap?
Yeah.
See, I made a roadmap like you're supposed to do. I thought you had a little more to talk about your profession.
Go ahead. You go.
Okay. Yeah, so I think estate planning, Dean wanted me to talk about a little bit, and I think it's important why estate planning is for everyone. And it's something that people totally avoid, like psychologically. We all know why, right? Like no one wants to talk about death or thinking about death. I totally get that. However, not wanting to think about it or talk about it does not mean that it's not going to happen. So I just always think like, okay, there's a really serious way to do everything, or there's the way that like people come in and we can talk about these things, but we can also look for kind of the humor or the common community or humanity in it, because more and more and more I have these conversations with people, it's like you just hear the same things over and over and over again, which the same fears, the same concerns, the same desires to provide for their family. So we're all kind of the same, but I think at the end of the day too, we're all the same in that we would prefer to pick where things go or how our children are taken care of, or how, if we have, a lot of people have family members who have disabilities or things where they wouldn't maybe be able to handle an estate on their own. I have clients that are caretakers for adult children because they can't take care of themselves. And it's such a stress for them to wonder, if something happened to me, what would happen to my child? Because they live with me, I take care of them, I help them with money, and so I just think it doesn't matter how much money you have. And actually, I do also think that people who even are on the smaller side of estates, they have more to lose without having an estate plan, because the cost of dealing with just the process itself of transferring things to people after someone dies is so much higher if you don't have a plan in place that a court can just say, okay, yep, let's just do this and go for it. You're taking advantage of a lot of benefit if you have a will, and it can be even a simple will. But people who have smaller estates, like their estate can afford less to lose. So why don't we make sure that everything that's in your estate really does go to support your kids or help your family or support this organization? And that was something I also wanted to bring up, because a common theme, along with the other common themes that I see, is that a lot of my clients are altruistic. They have charitable intentions. They're giving annually to different organizations, and they're really passionate about certain things. And then when it comes time to putting their will together, they don't want to include any of those organizations in their documents. They're like, I just want it all to go to my kids. I want to make sure my kids are taken care of. But the reality that I see with a lot of my clients is that their kids are all doing great. And, you know, a distribution or a gift to a charitable organization would not hurt their kids what their kids would get. And I always end up thinking I'm going to refer to something my dad's working on right now, but the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation has been working on for quite some time, which is the campaign called Leave 10, which is just trying to educate people that if you were making your will and decided to take 10% of your estate and gift that to an organization or organizations in our community that you believe in, it would help leave a legacy that lasts beyond you. And then your family, let's say you have 2 kids and they're going to get 50% of your estate each. You leave 10 instead to a charitable organization. Now they're getting 45% of your estate each. It's just, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to them, but it can really make a difference to our community. And so that is something that I do challenge my clients to think about. And they still may decide not to, but I do think it's interesting during our life that we have these passions that we're really into, and we want to do good in our community. And one of the best, easiest ways that you can do good in your community is by thinking about that gift at the end. You can make a really great, donation distribution to someone at the end and really make a lasting impact on an organization. You could help more kids come to Bellarmine, or, whatever organization you're into. I assume you guys are all into Bellarmine because you're here. But I think it's funny because there's a lot of things that people, like, you would just think they would know it, but they're not thinking about it all the time. So just something for you all to think about.
Yeah. Well said.
The other thing I wanted to say before Brian switches over to questions is estate planning has been really interesting over the past year, and the psychology has been really interesting over the past year. Obviously, because of COVID, I think it has done a good thing for estate planning in that it has brought to the forefront people's acceptance and feeling about we need to do something because something could happen to me, when really we live like that every single day of our lives. It's just not really at the forefront. So we've seen a huge rise in people with estate planning questions and wanting to set up estate plans, which is great, but it's great at any time. It's important to do at any time. But it has been a really interesting thing to see over the past year. And then dealing with everything, doing consultations with people about their estates, their families over Zoom has been really interesting. It's like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. Tell me about your family. Tell me how much money you have. Tell me, all these really personal things. I think it's been really interesting to see how everyone's adapted to doing things virtually. And this is just a side note, and I think a fun fact and interesting is one thing with estate planning that's been actually quite challenging during this time is that there is no substitute when you sign your will for signing it in front of 2 witnesses in person. The law of the state of Washington requires that your will be signed in front of 2 witnesses who are in the same room with you at the same time as being in the same room with each other. So it all has to happen simultaneously. And that's been something where there's really no workaround for that. So we've had to be very creative with how we've signed wills. And that's something that just had to keep happening in person, no matter what else we could do remotely. So the law always goes back to really kind of antiquated ideas of how things need to happen.
And one of the things I wanted to actually maybe touch on before we kind of get into question and answer is, in my industry as a planner, there's a lot of variations of people in my industry, and some of you here may work with various professionals. One of the things that my planning industry as a profession is kind of evolved over time, and what it's turning into, which I enjoy, is more of a recognized profession where some of you may have worked with people that are more investment focused, so they may give you investment ideas, or they may be like an insurance person, and it all kind of started in more of like a kind of a sales type of industry. And what it's been morphed into is more of a professional planning type of industry. Now, not everyone wants to do planning, but it has definitely changed over the years. So one of the things that when people are kind of searching out for some type of professional, it kind of really comes down to what you're looking for. Are you looking for someone to give you advice in your best interest and not their own? There's certain, people that are more equipped to do that because that's more of their business. So when people are looking for a planner or investment professional, one of the things I always tell people, interview multiple people, because everyone has maybe a different type of business model, different area of practice, different focus. Also, different personalities don't always mix well. So, these are people that, with my clients, we're working for hopefully a long time together, and they have to trust what I'm telling them. So there's an element of that trust and that goes along with what we do. And obviously in a lot of professions, trust is very important.
Well, you should like the person that you're working with too. I think that's important. There's a lot of attorneys, there's a lot of financial planners. And like Brian said earlier, there's a lot of right ways to do things, right? So you could talk to one financial planner and probably talk to 10 and get 10 different ideas of how to make your plan come true. You could talk to 10 different attorneys and we would all have a different take on how to do it. So, and mostly those are all right. They'll all work. So, really when it comes down to it, I think for the most part, making sure the person is reputable, but making sure that you like the person and you're comfortable with the style. And, I'm a good fit for some people and not a good fit for other people. And that's okay. Like there's so many of us out there. And, we and most of the other professionals in town, I feel like are really good and comfortable with making referrals to other people like us who may better fit, the person that you are. But I think it's important to know that you don't have to just go with one person. You can always, you need to test it out and make sure, especially when you're working with, talking about you, but in his profession, mine is more one and done. And then I'll see you maybe in 5 years or so to do an update if you need to. But with Brian, you're seeing him all the time, every year. So you want to make sure that's a good trusting relationship and one where you can really tell the person the truth about things so you can get the best advice.
Yeah. So it's important to talk to multiple people just to make sure it's a good fit. They align with what your interests are. Like the person, have that trust. And then, kind of understand what their role is, how they're compensated. There's a very wide range of ways that people are paid in my industry. So understand, are they doing this on an hourly basis? Are they getting some type of fee based on assets, that they're managing, or your estate? There's all kinds of different things. So ask those questions because there's going to be a wide range. There's no set formula. Not everyone in my industry has the same practice area, the same compensation structure. So it really pays to talk to multiple people.
Well, I think what you're talking about too is like, since you've been in the industry, it seems like there's a huge shift from people like financial planner used to refer mostly to people who were working for an investment company that would be working to invest your funds in that investment company. And now it seems like there's the bigger trend towards like, you can go in and consult with a person. And if it's like, you want to talk to him about retirement planning, he can help you with that. If it's, you want to talk about your budget and you're not going to invest anything, that's another thing that they can help with on more just like an hourly basis. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, and then, there's a lot of times that some people will say, well, I don't know if I have enough money to work with a planner and we definitely see that from time to time. There's certain, advisors out there that have, a minimum level of assets or net worth or some criteria to work with them. I think this is probably also my Bellarmine influence too, is I never really wanted to turn away people because I feel that no matter where you're starting from, you should get good advice and help you get to where you need to be, no matter if you're starting with zero or you're, fairly wealthy. I wanted to make sure that we provided good advice no matter where your starting point is. So that is definitely something that's not always the case. So when you're shopping around, you're looking professional. And just to kind of clarify, as in our industry, as a financial planner, our job is kind of be the quarterback of the team. There's definitely areas that I can't write wills. I'm not a CPA. I don't do taxes, but my job is to look at the big picture and coordinate the team, making sure that, your tax person or whatever you're doing tax wise is coordinating with your investment in portfolio. Your estate plan matches up. So, what a good planner does is hopefully coordinate a team of professionals working on your behalf, coordinating, and ultimately to give you peace of mind and enjoy the things that you want to do that are more interesting instead of worrying about your finances. Really, that's the ultimate goal of a planner. And that's really where hopefully
you can make the process a lot simpler too. Because
Yeah.
a lot of times, people will come in to see me or people will come in to see Brian or other financial planners, and then they're trying to tell us what the other person said, and a lot gets lost in translation. So I think having a good team in place, and his position always really is, because they do work with our clients so frequently and they're so intimate with our clients. Whereas I'm more like of an outsider, and the tax person is often just once a year, and they're touching base about a certain thing. They really can make sure that everybody is coordinated on the same page. Like, oh, did you know that this is part of the equation now? Like, that's really important information to know. And clients don't always know what's important to us to know. So it can be really helpful to just have everyone. And I think, sometimes I think people think like, oh, that's overkill. But actually, I think it just makes everything way more efficient for you too. Don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And your plan's going to be better, and everyone he would then have a copy of their estate planning documents in their file, and just everything is more cohesive.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And one of the things that financial planning is difference between legal and tax. Tax, there's always a deadline. You got to do it every year, hopefully, to stay up to date with the IRS. Legal, estate planning is not necessarily something that you have to do, but a lot of times,
yes, it is.
well, you should do it. But there is no deadline. And a lot of times it happens after maybe a person has experienced a bad situation, passing of a loved one, a litigious estate. So they're like, I don't want that to happen to me. I need to get my stuff done, is probably very common. In financial planning, a lot of times people there's no deadline. It's something you can always push later. I'll deal with that tomorrow. And then
I think people think of it as a luxury too. Like, it's kind of like that. I can't afford a financial planner when really that's not the case.
Yeah. And a lot of times, people come to me and we'll do a plan and they're like, gosh, I wish I would have done that a long time ago. And if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd have a lot of nickels.
Me too. Brian and I would be on vacation constantly.
So, that's the one thing is it's not to preach to the choir here, but it's always better to do something today than tomorrow. Because the one thing is, especially with planning and for the future, especially investing in retirement and things like that, you can't make up time. And time is the best thing we can put on our side. So, hopefully that's my little soapbox today is if you're thinking about planning or doing something or taking action, please take action.
He has shown me the graphs of compounding things. It's impressive. So, that's something to consider. And I would say from the estate planning side of things, it's really important to remember that the best time to make your decisions is when you are in a good, healthy, happy place and you don't have some catastrophic thing hanging over your head. You're healthy. You can take time to think about your decisions. They're well thought out. That's a way better place to be planning than, oh no, like some emergent thing has happened and now I have to do it really quickly and I'm stressed about a million other things and maybe my thinking isn't as clear as it would be. So, it's just much better to do it when you're healthy and happy. And I always think too, because people just don't want to do it and they procrastinate it. And honestly, I do find another interesting psychological thing is that oftentimes in married couples, it's like the wives are all for it. They're ready. They want to talk about it. They want to plan it. The husbands do not want to face it. They don't want to talk about it as much. We've had cases where, where the husband just can't face signing. And in my mind, it's like, it's kind of like putting the umbrella in your car, when you think it might rain and then you just never need to use it, but it's there if you need it. It just is such a nice security to know. And just like Brian was saying, there is literally not one client that I have worked with for estate planning who at the end, when they were done signing and I was handing them their done documents, did not say, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought. And I feel so much better. Like, we've been meaning to do this and I feel so much better now. And that's such a great feeling to hand stuff off to someone and just know, like, okay, they can sleep at night. And that's one kind of burden that we all carry around with us. I think we're always thinking like, oh man, I should do this or that. And they can just take that right off their list of things to do and things to worry about.
Great. So one of the things we want to do is if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box and we'll offer that up. Or if you would like to ask the question, or if we have people in a similar profession that are alums that would like to share something, we can certainly go into the reactions and the raised hand function, and we'll open up your mic. If you go too long, we might close off your mic, but I think we'd love to hear from people that are there. We're really fortunate this evening that our principal, Cindy Davis, is with us up in my right-hand corner. She's got so much on her plate these days trying to educate in these COVID times that it's a blessing that we have her leading our school, and certainly that she joined us this evening. We also have some wonderful folks. All you are wonderful folks, but some interesting folks from around the different parts of the country. I see that Tom Countryman has joined us. Tom has been with us a couple of years ago, addressed a large group of our students, and then an evening assembly of parents and students from UPS came over, International Studies. Tom is the former Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation for about 6 years through a couple different administrations, or at least the Obama administration, and still active and still a voice out there. And so we're so pleased to see Tom. But the real celebrity here this evening, you might not know about, is Mark Wittel. Mark is a 63. By the way, Tom's a 75 grad. I think 75 is right here for Tom. Mark is with us from the Bay Area in California. Mark's a 63 graduate, and if you didn't know this, you should. Mark still holds the Bellarmine shot put record at 56 feet 4.5 inches that he set in 1963. Wow. It is the oldest record on the books for Bellarmine track and field. All the other ones are in the 90s and the thousands, et cetera, et cetera. And Mark still holds that record to this day. So I don't know how he did it back in 63, or maybe Bellarmine men or shot putters are getting weaker, but we're glad that Mark's with us. He's a great supporter of the school. So are there any questions or comments? Oh, Tom's got his hand up. Let's unmute Tom and see what, go ahead, Tom. I think we tried to unmute you. There you go.
I was actually just clapping for Mark and his record.
That's great. Well, that we should get a clap for that. That record's held up. That's a long time to hold that record. So Bill has up there. Bill has. Let me ask Bill to unmute if I can do it. There you go.
Yeah, I'll get right to it. Brian, what kind of advice are you giving to people who have relied on the stretch IRA, and now that's been limited to 10 years under the Secure Act?
Yeah. So in terms of like, how does that change planning? Is that what you're?
Well, are there alternatives that somebody could use to, salvage some of that benefit of long-term, or are you just stuck with 10 years of stretch?
Yeah. So what Bill is referring to is, some of you may know that when you inherit like an IRA, you're used to be able to take a minimum distribution payment for the rest of your life. And it allows you to stretch the IRA and keep it in a tax deferred account for a period of time, indefinitely. And that was the benefit of that, is keeping the money growing and in the deferred account. And recently and I'm actually not sure why they changed that. I really haven't heard a good answer of why they would want to limit that, but they changed that so that you would be limited to 10 years only, so that the money would have to be distributed within 10 years. So part of it is the tax revenue they're going to get sooner rather than later. So that could have been part of the equation. But it really was a nice benefit for people to stretch out inheriting funds, keep it in a deferred account, and keep that money growing for the next generation. And that unfortunately changed to 10 years. So in terms of what you can do on that, I mean, unfortunately, there's not a lot. I mean, it is what it is, unless they change the law again, which can happen. But in terms of that IRA, that is limited. And I can't remember offhand, I don't have the information in front of me, but I believe there is something to do with the age of the decedent versus the recipient.
Right.
It depends on how the age difference between the two. And I think there's something to do with I want to say a 10-year, but please don't quote me on that. I can't remember offhand exactly the rules. So unfortunately, yes, it went away. On IRAs, you really, other than, maybe, this again, we're getting into some weeds, which I got to be careful there. I can't really give specific financial recommendations on a call like this, but, there may be some things to do conversion strategies to put money in Roth IRAs, converting that so that money, you don't have to take those distributions. So there is definitely some alternatives, and it's definitely a case by case basis. But yeah, I was disappointed when I saw that provision come up in the recent law. But really good question.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Bill. We have a question for Brianne. Somebody wrote, I know Alaska accepts a handwritten will, but is a handwritten or holographic will acceptable in Washington state?
Not really. So in Washington, you could handwrite your will, but you would still have to have it witnessed the same way. So it would have to be witnessed by 2 independent witnesses, and they have to sign 2 different, they have to witness, and then they have to sign a self-proving affidavit. So not really. You could accomplish it. It wouldn't be my suggestion. So always, I think seeing an attorney is the best thing. Obviously, I'm an attorney, so I have to say that. And I do think it is the best thing, because we get to walk through everything with you and help you think through all the possibilities. But if you are just not into that or whatever, then there are some internet services that you can get a will done. You just have to the most important thing with wills is that they work, right? So you have a plan, but the plan needs to work. And a couple of things need to happen for it to work. So one would be that it's witnessed properly, because if it isn't, it's as if you do not have a will, which is just really disappointing. And I've seen that happen multiple times. And even with the internet wills, they'll send you the instructions, but a lot of times people just think, oh, that's probably not that important. Or like, I made the will, it says what I want, that's going to happen. The problem is the law just hasn't accepted that. So, and the reason is because we want to make sure that the person's intention is actually what is in the document. And we usually assure ourselves by having 2 people watch the person sign the document and feel certain that they know that the person who is signing the document knew what they were signing and they actually intended it to happen. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is it has to be able to be found. So one of the bigger problems I always see is that people have done their documents and then they put them somewhere safe, and this place is so safe that no one can find them. So a word to the wise, and something I just emphasize over and over and over again, is like, where are you going to keep it? Who is going to know about where you keep it? How often are you going to remind them that you keep it there? Because people are of 2 camps, I find. One camp is like, something bad happens, they're laser focused, they remember every single thing you ever told them. The other camp is like, oh gosh, something terrible happened, I'm a deer in the headlights, I don't remember a thing that you told me for like 2 to 3 weeks because I'm just no fault of my own, dazed. So repetition and multiple people knowing where you keep things. I know that's really anti, what's the word? Like that goes against a lot of what people think about things, about security, but like people need to be able to find it. And there's not a whole lot someone can do with your will, if they got it. It's not going to have like your bank account information on it or your social security number or anything like that. So it's important that people know.
Yeah, and on that topic, one thing that I think a lot of people just think about, and probably some of you have had loved ones pass, and maybe they're in charge of their financial situation, or they're dealing with their own medical situation, and then what happens if they're gone? How do you pick up the pieces? Like, how do they pay their bills? What's due? One of the things I think I'm a big believer in is having
Passwords.
Well, yeah, I mean, having essentially everything that goes on in your life documented on one easy to find, easy to interpret document. So from passwords to financial sites where you may be going in, your social media accounts to be able to close those down, or a lot of the stuff we have is all over, spread over everywhere. And if you imagine you're gone, can someone just come in and pick up where you left off?
Well, and I just think about how hard it is for me myself to keep track of all my passwords for everything. So like, then just imagine someone stepping in and like, if something tragic has happened, families are often very, very disturbed by social media accounts that are open and sitting there for people to post on, and they want them down. So, that's something where you need to give them the information to be able to help in that situation, because the companies won't help unless there's a directive in your will. The law has been tricky around social media accounts. It's starting to catch up, and now lawyers are drafting around it. So like in a will that I would draft, it would include a provision that tells your personal representative or your executor that they have the power and the authority to deal with your social media accounts and your digital property. And that's really important, because if those companies don't see it in the will, they don't take it as a power that the person has. So, but yeah, like what he's talking about is just the practicality of things. It's great to have the documents. It's great to have the financial plan, but like, are people going to be able to find this plan? Are they going to know what the universe of your stuff is? You need to give them like, okay. And I always think a very low tech, easy way to do this is just once a year or even every couple of years, you just in January, maybe you just take all your statements from all your accounts and you put them together with your will. Because then if something happened to you, and print out from your digital accounts if you don't get statements in the mail, but then if something happened and a person is finding your will and they're finding this stack of statements, they've got a universe to deal with. They know who to call, what your account number is, what an approximate balance might be that they could expect. And those are just simple but very practical steps that you can take that a lot of people do not take. And then I've got people in here saying like, I have no idea, where she banked or who did her taxes, or, these are just really practical things that but you have to let other people know too.
Yeah. And finances, and as we all know, can be very private, and some families are more open about discussing their personal financial situation, and some, families are not open about those things. So that's very comfortable to talk about. They don't want to share that information. But we find that having a conversation now rather than later, and knowing what's going on with, your loved ones' financial affairs, just to be prepared in case they can't act on their behalf, either in death or incapacity, is really important to do ahead of time. So you're not scrambling to try to put the pieces together in a already stressful situation. So,
and transparency in general. So I'm sure Brian sees the same thing, but the estates that I help with where we have the biggest problems are where expectations are not met. So if someone has played their cards close to their chest and never told anyone what their plan is, that can sometimes cause problems because there's doubt and suspicion that that plan that comes out is actually what the person wanted, or the person told them something different verbally. And just like what Brian's saying, it's so uncomfortable to have some of these conversations. And I think society has been changing over time to where transparency and openness and honesty is becoming a lot more normal than it used to be. But that's a very big shift from where we've been in the past, where like people wanted to keep their finances very private. They didn't even want their kids to know about it. They don't want to tell people their plan because they're probably afraid of what the people's reaction would be. But what I have found in life is that the more open people are about their plan, whether their kids like it or not, or their sister likes it or not, the expectation is set properly so that when someone dies and this is the plan and they've been telling them the plan, and even if I don't like the plan, I still understand that that plan is happening. That can really cut down on family issues, which I think is the last thing any one of us wants to have. Family issues are the saddest, most depressing thing that can come out of an estate. And I really see that not nearly as often when you have a plan. But if you can be open and transparent and talk about it, it's almost none.
Okay, great. We have another question. What options are available if you're having difficulty identifying an executor?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that can be tricky. So you've got kind of two main options. You probably already know this, everyone, but you can name a person that you know, so a family member, a friend, a trusted advisor, not a financial planner. They typically cannot do it based on regulations, but CPAs often will do it. So a person that you know, or an institution that you either work with or have faith in. And it used to be that it was almost always just people would pick people that they know. And over time and our litigious society, I think people have come to accept that you have to pick the right person to do that job. And if you don't have any of those right people, then it is time to look outside of your friend circle and your family circle and select an institution that is well versed in fiduciary duties, and they have regulations and they have accountability. And yes, it will probably cost more than having your brother or your child do it, but in the long run, it could cost less, because when you're putting family members in charge of things, if they're not the right person, or they're not detail oriented, or they have any sort of malicious or dishonest intent, you're going to end up with an estate that's going to have a lot more problems. That's going to end up costing more anyway in the long run. So I do really encourage clients to think about that. Like, okay, you've got 3 kids, you're putting one of them in charge. How is your children's relationship? And oftentimes we'll say, oh, they're great, they won't have any problem with it. And then it's an estate where like the kids don't get along, and they tell me they've never gotten along and no one likes each other. And now because someone died and there's money involved, all these feelings come out that you just wouldn't have expected. So those are kind of the main choices. And, you know, we often will help you figure that out, what type of institution to go to, a bank, trust department, or maybe more of a local kind of executor service around here, or whatever fits your needs.
We have another question. Do you recommend a living trust in addition to your will?
So living trusts are actually considered to be what's called a will substitute. So I always talk about estate planning. I generally just talk about it as a will. But a living trust would function the same way that a will would in Washington when you die, in that it says who's in charge, where things should go, and just kind of the process for doing that gives all the powers and the duties, just like a will. The difference with a living trust is that it will avoid the probate process in Washington as to anything that is owned by the trust. So when you write a will, that's really straightforward, right? You put down your intentions, you sign it, you put it away. If you die, it becomes effective. So it springs to life at your death. With a living trust, they call it a living trust because when you sign that document, it becomes alive right now and it's functional right now. And the benefit that people are trying to get from having a living trust instead of just having a will is that anything that's inside of the trust does not have to go through the probate process to get from you and your estate to the people that you're leaving it to. So with my clients, my typical advice based on kind of the experience of Washington law is that our legislature here has really streamlined the probate process. And basically, if you have a will in Washington that provides your executor what's called non-intervention powers, which every will provides that for the executor, you need to check, but for the most part, it does. If you have that in the will and the court accepts the will and appoints your person as the personal representative, then basically what the law says is from this point forward, we're going to treat this person, the personal representative, as if they are the trustee of a trust. And we are going to trust that they are going to do their job correctly. And we're not going to have any more oversight over this case until it's time for it to be closed. And we're just, okay, fine, it's closing. Or in the event that there's some person contesting the will and now we have a court case to deal with. But either way, once you admit the will, it's kind of like you're dealing with a trust situation. So if you live in Washington and you just have Washington real estate, you know, I don't see a huge difference in the trust administration process versus the probate process. You're pretty much doing all the same things. So you're notifying people that the person passed away, you're figuring out what they owned, you're figuring out who the beneficiaries are, you're figuring out what taxes are owed. You know, you're just kind of doing those ticky-tacky homework type things. And you're going to do that in a trust, and you're going to do that with a will and probate. So that part's not really much different. If you own real estate in more than one state, then a living trust is a no-brainer because it will avoid probate in both or all of the states where you own real estate. So that's pretty much like with my clients, that's when I say, oh, you need to have a living trust at this point. But otherwise, it's really just kind of a cost-benefit analysis for them. And we talk through kind of what their objectives are, because avoiding probate in Washington is not a huge thing. In some states, avoiding probate is huge, like California. You don't want to probate because of the cost that's associated with it. There's actually a fee schedule that you can look up online that shows what the executor and what the attorney gets percentage-wise from the estate based on the dollar value of the estate. And is mind-boggling. So in California, it's maybe almost rising to the level of malpractice if your attorney does not give you a living trust if you have real estate, or you rise to the level of needing a probate. In Washington, we don't have the same situation here.
Great. All right, Rick Oldenburg, we're going to unmute. He went back to his mountain picture, but
Hi, Dad.
we couldn't keep him off with you on there, Brianne. So go ahead, Dad, ask a question.
Yeah, I can materialize and dematerialize in a moment's notice. I just wanted to underscore this idea, Brianne and Brian, about do a will and take care of your estate now. I just went through a situation which you know about. I went to a funeral in Wisconsin for a cousin of mine who was 9 months older than me. I got back, and 3 or 4 days later, I got notice that my 45-year-old second cousin had died in his sleep. And he looked, I was talking with him. He was the last person I talked with before I left the former funeral. And if anyone in this world thinks they have time to waste and not get stuff done, I would just point to that. He died in his sleep. He had no indication it was happening. They now think it's long COVID. So he got it first in May, and he got it a second time, they think, in November. But my only advice to anybody is just don't put it off. Nobody was ready for that second death, and it's tragic when it happens. And then finally, Brian, my always question to you is high frequency traders. How much are they still influencing what goes on? I'm watching Bitcoin go crazy. I'm watching GameStop go nuts. How much are they playing in those kinds of things? Or is there any way to even know?
When I get questions like that, I usually pull out my crystal ball and shake it, and then make some guarantee. My compliance department's on the call today, so I'm not going to be saying anything. But yeah, I mean, there's, all I can say about the market is don't try to predict what's going to happen, because you'll look very silly. But yeah, I mean, what Rick's talking about is high frequency trading and, making volatility and extreme market conditions more so than we've had historically. And that is definitely true. And, on the market, look what's happening in the market today and where we're at in the economy and COVID. It doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but it's just a testament to try not to, predict what because you're really going to probably be on the losing end of that long term. So yeah, high frequency trading, to answer your question, Rick, is probably affecting more volatility, causing more volatility in the markets by the volume of trading and things like that. But that's usually more short-term in nature, not necessarily long-term. That can cause short-term volatility, but in the long term, we usually see things kind of revert back to what we expect over a longer period of time. But yeah, definitely in the short term, we're going to see higher swings in the market, day-to-day swings in the market, probably influenced somewhat by high frequency trading.
Well, great. I don't see any other hands or comments in there. I'm talking slowly in case there's any last minute questions. I would point out that once again, through these conversations, we see how blessed we are to have Bellarmine alums who choose a profession. They bring with it the integrity, the passion, the professionalism. They bring all those Jesuit values with them, as you can see by the way that both Brianne and Brian talk about their work. And when you multiply that about all the different Bellarmine alums, ones on the screen and others, and their profession and their acumen and their sense of right and wrong, it's a blessing to have folks like that come into our communities all around the country and indeed all over the world. So I want to thank Brian and Brianne for sharing with us and give them a round of applause, which is the Zoom way of clapping. Now we can, there you go. Okay, it took you a little while to come up with that, but it's the best we could do. And again, I think if there are any other questions or comments, we can reach out to Brian and Brianne, or you can let us know if you want any follow-up information or anything. So again, we want to thank you all for being a part of our conversation this evening. Our May conversation, we're working on the date, but it's going to be very interesting. We're going to have some alums who've been right in the middle of the education process during this COVID era. We'll have someone from Bellarmine at an administrative faculty level, someone from a different Jesuit school in the state who's a Bellarmine alum, hopefully. And then we're looking for Bellarmine alums, one or two that have been working in the public school arena. So it's been a challenge educating and administrating, and we want to share that information. I think will be a very interesting topic for our May alumni conversation series. So again, thank you all for joining us this evening. We're pleased to see everybody's face. Shout out to my friend Mark. I don't know if we lost the undersecretary. Maybe he's gone already. So, but listen, we thank you all for coming this evening and have a great evening. And we'll see you all again very soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us,
Yeah,
Dean.
thank
Nice
you.
to see everybody.
Thanks, Brianne and Brian. Appreciate it.